and welcome to the Janelle King Show. I'm Janelle King. This is Extra 106.3, and this is where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. And today's table topic is the danger of compassionate policy. So let me start by saying we are all guilty. And if you care about people, even on a basic level, and you're not a sociopath or a psychopath, then it's safe to say that you have found yourself falling into this spiral of what is called compassion policy. If you're a progressive or a liberal voter, compassion policy focuses on creating a more equitable society through active government intervention and social programs designed to address what they call systemic inequalities. And they also believe that it provides support for vulnerable populations. You see this when you see people advocating for universal health care, which I discussed in a previous show, as well as social safety nets that are rooted in compassionate policy, along with fighting against school choice or increasing the minimum wage and some of these criminal justice reform policies. You have universal child care and affordable housing, to name a few. And all of these sound great. But is it? So before we do a bit of a deep dive into whether they're good or not, where do compassionate policies show up on the conservative side? Because we are not exempt. For us, it looks a little different. In many cases, Republicans are guilted into neglecting our morals and our principles, and in some cases, their party principles to receive the acceptance of others. And this is why you find so many moderate Republicans in the suburbs where there are a lot of interactions with neighbors and golf buddies and tennis teams and country club liberals. You see, compassionate conservatism is a political philosophy that incorporates conservative principles with a focus on social welfare and addressing these social issues through government policy, but often in partnership with private organizations. The plan is to maintain these traditional conservative values such as limited government, fiscal responsibility, and even personal responsibility, while also trying to emphasize the importance of helping those in need. This is where we hear this concept of being fiscally conservative but socially liberal. Whenever I hear that, I personally believe that those are the people who wish to live in a world with the benefits of conservatism and the approval of all. Most importantly, their liberal friends. And they wish to be seen as these progressive people on these important issues. You often hear statements like, I don't want to be on the wrong side of history. Although in many cases, their current perspective and their current heart posture is already on the right side of history. Here's a perfect example of these actions on display. In 2004, Congress could not get 2/3 of the majority to pass the right for homosexuals to marry, gay marriage. So to be clear, when the Senate last considered gay marriage and a gay marriage ban in July of 2004, supporters were able to muster up around 48 of the 67 votes they needed to pass, and they did that during a procedural test. One of the big reasons is that supporters struggled to obtain a clear majority for the momentous step towards amending the Constitution. In surveys, most Americans said that they oppose legal recognition of gay marriage, but many appeared comfortable with allowing states, which are traditionally responsible for regulating marriage, to handle this issue. And at that time, the latest Gallup poll at the time of 2004 said that 50% supported a constitutional ban on gay marriage, while 47% opposed it. Another survey conducted in late February around that same time underscored the importance of religion and morality in American lives. But it wasn't an issue on the forefront of most Americans. In fact, a survey asked Americans to name the most serious moral crises in America today. And at the top of the list, 28% cited that kids not raised with right values was their number one concern. Can you believe that? And now here we are, 20 years later, and I think they were right. Next came corruption in government and businesses, followed by greed and materialism, as well as people being too focused on themselves, too much of this inappropriate sexual stuff and violence in the media. But only 3% named abortion and homosexuality as the nation's top moral challenge, even among those who attended religious services most often. So, what happened? How did we get here? Here meaning we are now so far past allowing gay marriage that we are now allowing men and women's sports. And we're now advocating for it and claiming that men can get pregnant. Well, in 2004, John Halpin, a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress, said that there is a deep hunger to get away from religion being associated solely with the anti-abortion and anti-gay marriage agenda. There is a deep public yearning for an alternative moral vision. But it's not just talking about the left's issues and tagging the word moral on it. You have to talk to people at a personal and family level about what faith and values mean. This was very dangerous because it took the discussion from the main stage and they equipped your neighbor and your family members with the ammunition needed to guilt so many into pushing past your own personal beliefs and human nature and accepting what they feel is right. Those who were against legalizing gay marriage feared that it would lead to more policies designed to normalize the sin of homosexuality. Others believed it would normalize a behavior that is against our nature and lead to fewer traditional families. Those supporting gay marriage felt love is love and it should be allowed to express in whatever capacity it wishes. Today we hear things like hearts over parts or Jesus is just like us, even if you are homosexual. We're hearing things like it's not the marriage that's wrong, it's the sexual immorality. It's the acts that take place within the marriage. And it goes on and on and on. Either way, we closed the door to what was biblically and scientifically right and replaced it with what was socially acceptable, taking issues such as gay marriage that was a priority to only 3% of Americans. And through guilt, shame, and compassion, or what we thought was compassion, they made it a political point of contention. Fast forward to today, and we're yet again at a bitter crossroads. Another compassionate policy that's coming home to roost: illegal immigration. As a conservative, for years we turned a blind eye, allowing rural America to benefit from cheap labor, telling ourselves that we are helping those who can't help themselves, those who come to our countries with little to no opportunity. We allowed nonprofits to work with our politicians and manipulate our immigration laws, creating loopholes in our refugee policy in order to make it more accessible and easier for illegal migrants to come into this country. And the most egregious behavior was seen by the Biden administration just recently, who adjusted our laws so much that we saw the greatest influx of illegal migrants enter this country in history, all in the name of compassion. But what compassion doesn't tell you is that, much like sugar, you get this quick boost of energy, you feel better for a time, it tastes good and feels right, but it also feeds cancer like nothing else and nothing you've seen before. It places you on an unhealthy path of destruction, one bite at a time. It's not the Coca-Cola here and there that's the problem. It's the need to have more. It's that the Coca-Cola was good, but now you got to have a donut. And now we got to have chocolate bar. And now we got to justify all of this through this term called moderation when we're not really being moderate. Because nothing ever stays moderate, particularly in politics. And here we are now having to clean up the problem that we created. And we're wondering why it feels so uncompassionate. As a result of Trump calling for mass deportation and those who are in America illegally, protests have sprung out all across the country, calling it the No Kings protest. And according to progressives hosting these protests, the phrase generally reflects ideas associated with opposing autocracy or centralized government or authoritarian leadership, symbolizing the rejection of outdated or oppressive power structures in favor of more equitable alternatives. According to a report, millions of Americans was set to participate in the No King's Day protest nationwide this past Saturday, June 14th, opposing President Trump's policies while the military parade occurred in Washington, D.C., while we celebrated our army. The protests are a response to Trump's immigration laws and the raised and the perceived authoritarianism that they believe they hold. The problems that these protests have is that it doesn't reflect the sentiment of most Americans. Recent surveys reflect an overwhelming support from Americans regarding the enforcement of the law, revealing that 51% of Americans support Trump's approach to immigration and border enforcement, coinciding with his decision to send National Guard troops to Los Angeles amid the related protests. According to CNN, his approval regarding immigration issues has skyrocketed. Take a listen.
Trump is doing so much better than he was in his first term, more than the issue of immigration. No wonder the Times has written up the way that he is. Trump is begging for a fight on this because he knows what he's doing so far is working with the American electorate.
Where does immigration rank on issues for him? How is he doing compared to other issues?
Yeah, so I think what's so important is it is his top issue so far. And the reason it is his top issue is because take a look at the individual nuggets in here. Why are people approving of Trump on immigration, approve of these different immigration actions? Well, Trump's administration's program to deport those here illegally. Look at this, 54% approval. How about agents searching your hometown for those that they think are here illegally? Again, positive territory here, above 50% for Donald Trump. So it's not just on the broad issue of immigration where Trump is doing well. It's on the specifics. When you dive into the issues, Trump is above 50% and his actions are above 50%, at least with those most directly connected to what's going on right now out in Los Angeles.
So Donald Trump, the president, picking a fight on this. And to an extent, you see Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, a Democrat, and the California Governor Gavin Newsom pushing back. So what do voters see in terms of their perceptions of Republicans, the president, or Democrats, say Gavin Newsom on this issue?
Yeah, the American electorate believe that the Democrats don't have a clue on the issue of immigration. I mean, you could just take it here. Closer to trust more in immigration, Democrats versus Republicans. Got 3 different polls for you across the board. They all tell the same story. Republicans lead on the issue of immigration. You see it here, CBS +6. You see it here, CNN +6. You see it here, Ipsos, even bigger, +19. No matter what poll you look at, no matter which way you cut it, the American public is with the Republicans. The American public is with Donald Trump, and to a much greater extent than they were in term number 1. And it's not just on the broad issue of immigration. It's on the specifics as well, in which the American public is with Donald Trump and the Republicans. And that is why Donald Trump is eager to take on this fight and eager for those scenes at a loss.
So to be clear, we are facing an issue that is not supported by most Americans, that was once seen as not an issue at all or of high importance. Besides, these were people who were simply doing the jobs that we don't want to do. But now we're seeing the Mexican flag being waved on American soil in opposition to American laws. How did we get here? How did the old talking points that we often hear today, referring to illegal immigrants as hardworking, our neighbors, our co-workers, now turn into this? It's due to compassionate leadership, guilt, and misguided narratives. And after the break, I'm going to tackle a few of those narratives and see if they're truly compassionate at all. We're just getting started. Don't leave the table. You're listening to The Janelle King Show right here on Extra 106.3. We'll be right back. Thank you so much for joining the show. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you'll be notified every time I upload new content. Now back to the discussion. Welcome back to the Janelle King Show. I'm Janelle King. This is Extra 106.3. And this is where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned for family gatherings, but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. And today's table topic is absolutely necessary to have a strong republic. We're talking about the danger of compassionate policy. And let me start by saying that none of us are immune. And if you're joining me for the first time, I delved into how compassionate politics affects both sides of the aisle in the previous segment. And if you care about people, even on the basic level, and you aren't a sociopath or a psychopath, chances are you've found yourself falling into what is called compassionate policy and supporting compassionate policy. Now, for my progressive friends out there, you see compassionate policy as a way to build a more just and equitable society, using government intervention and social programs to tackle what you appear to be systemic inequalities and support of the vulnerable. You support things like universal health care and social safety nets, expanding rights and helping those in need, and it all sounds noble. But what if you were told that it isn't compassionate at all? And before we get into that, let's make sure we take a step back and look at the other side of the aisle, because for many conservatives, similar ideas are embraced, but in a different form. We call it compassionate conservatism. It's a policy that tries to blend this idea of traditional conservative values with a sense of social responsibility. It's limited government, personal responsibility, fiscal responsibility, and all of those things that are at the core of our principles, but it also emphasizes partnership in private organizations and community effort to help those in need. Some might call it fiscally conservative, but socially liberal. Though I believe that many are just trying to hold on to their morals by still appearing to be progressive enough to keep their liberal friends, and let's be honest, to avoid the label of being unkind or uncaring, and to feel what most white people feel is white guilt. This ties into cultural shifts that we're seeing today, like the acceptance of gay marriage, which has led to debates over gender and sexuality like never before. Many of these issues, once reserved for moral and religious discussions, have now been turned into political battlegrounds driven by narratives that harness guilt and social acceptance, crossing into today's hot and button issue of immigration. And the idea of helping, quotation, others has led us to turn a blind eye or even manipulate policies, refugee laws, loopholes, and allow illegal immigration to surge. In many ways, this compassion has turned into a problem, especially when it's exploited and it is misused. And that brings us to the No Kings protests that we're seeing today. These demonstrations claim to oppose what is seen as authoritarian overreach, targeting recent immigration enforcement actions, but are they really rooted in compassion or something else? Well, in order to adequately determine the root of these protests and this debate, we must understand our laws in America. You see, historically, the United States immigration laws were crafted to strike a balance between welcoming those who seek a better life and protecting our nation's security. And in earlier days, our policies focused on controlled and selective immigration, requiring immigrants to assimilate into our culture and contribute economically. Refugee laws and asylum protections were put in place to help those who were fleeing persecution or violence, which is a compassionate and a noble goal if you think about it and you take it on face value. But at the same time, these laws included important provisions to prevent illegal entry, such as border enforcement measures, visa regulations, and immigration controls, all designed to hold our sovereignty and ensure safety for American citizens. But if you fast forward recent decades, we see a different trend. You see, under various administrations, there has been a mounting pressure for more flexible laws, easier pathways to citizenship, family reunification, and expanding humanitarian protections. While well-intended, these efforts have often created unintended loopholes. And there are issues to having these loopholes. because these loopholes have been exploited by criminals and opportunists who are seeking to bypass lawful immigration channels. As a result of unauthorized immigration has surged, straining our resources, impacting our jobs, and challenging the integrity of our borders. But what's more concerning is that some government policies and activist groups at times loosened enforcement and relaxed rules, claiming it's being compassionate or humanitarian. But in reality, these policies can send a terrible message. It sends messages to illegals that illegal crossing is acceptable, or if that we even encourage it. It's about more than border security. It's about protecting our sovereignty and ensuring the rule of law. We believe in a fair system that enforces our laws, that respects our borders, and that prioritizes the safety and security of our citizens. You see, the narrative about our process being too difficult or taking too long is valid if you don't understand the purpose of border protections. So that leads me to the first narrative that we have to debunk. And it's this idea that those who care about border safety somehow don't care about the people coming across. That isn't true. But most importantly, it's so misguided. I can care about the people and support sound policy at the same time. Those who care about border safety aren't thinking about what's best for migrants. We think about what's best for the United States because the laws you must break to become an undocumented or illegal have a specific purpose to protect Americans. And if you have a compassionate heart, you may be tempted to say that what's best for Americans is to be open to others. And I totally agree, but within parameters and the law. You see, another narrative that must be tackled is this idea of a stolen land or this stolen land story, a controversial view that has gained traction among some of these progressives today. And it's the idea that our United States immigration laws are fundamentally void or illegitimate because the land was stolen from Native Americans. So you have progressives who hold this viewpoint based on the history of European colonization, where Native American tribes were displaced and often violently removed from their ancestral land, so to speak. They argue that this land was taken without fair treaties or mutual consent, and that they see this as profound injustice that still casts shadows over current borders. So they claim that because the founding of America was built on a conquest and land theft, the legitimacy of our laws and sovereignty of our nation is inherently questionable, and we don't have to abide by them. They even call for a revaluation of our borders, suggesting that they are made on equitable and unlawful agreements, suggesting they are not based on equitable or lawful agreements, but on a history of conquest and injustice. I mean, they're partially correct, I guess. But the fact of the matter is, yes, this land, the soil that we're standing on, may have been inhabited by Native Americans at one point. Native Americans who did not have a centralized government or immigration laws preventing others from entering their land. And yes, a lot of blood was shed on both ends. I mean, check out Tecumseh, the Native American that certainly did not go down without a fight. But the Native Americans learned a very painful lesson, and that's that without laws and the enforcement of boundaries, you have no country. And in their case, you have no land. So much so that Native American reservations now have a way to handle illegal entry. They have their own governing laws. They have the authority to enforce laws related to trespassing and unauthorized entry into and within their lands. This sovereignty means that tribes can enforce local regulations, and they also coordinate with federal agencies when it comes to issues like illegal crossings. In fact, Immigration laws and enforcement primarily falls under federal jurisdiction, and agencies like ICE work closely with tribal authorities to address illegal crossings onto their reservations. And when non-natives are found illegally entering or residing on reservations, tribal and law enforcement can often detain them temporarily until federal authorities can step in and handle the case under national immigration law. It's also worth noting that many reservations are located near or along the United States borders, making them a strategic point for border security. And some tribes support increased law enforcement through border enforcement to help prevent legal crossings. And some tribes support increased border enforcement to help prevent illegal crossings onto their lands and to ensure that our borders are secure. So we have people who are protesting in the name of Native Americans, the same Native Americans who enforce their policies against illegal entry, so much so that they work with ICE, the very organization that they are fighting, to ensure that it doesn't happen on their reservations. And if you don't believe me, I want you to try to walk on a Native American reservation, try to move into a home, start a business on their reservation, and see what happens. You don't have to like our past, but I'd be daggone if you love our country. This nation, America, was not formed on the backs of Native Americans. It was formed on the backs of Americans. Americans who, unlike the No Kings protesters, actually had a king to defeat. You see, selective outrage is a tool of the compassionate. Don't fall for it. Here's another compassionate narrative that we often hear used over and over and over again. And it's used as an excuse to break our laws. And it's this idea that we are removing the most hardworking and unproblematic of our society. I'm sorry, guys, but it's just not true. In order to be productive in any society, you must understand the culture, you must understand the laws and the language of that country. The truth is, on average, it typically takes around 5 to 7 years for a legal immigrant to substantially settle into a new country, including learning the language, understanding social norms, and integrating into the community. When you consider an illegal immigrant who is hiding in the shadows and unable to participate fully due to a lack of legal documentation, we get people who have been in the country unproductive for decades. And based on recent trends and data from prior years, Hispanics tend to have higher participation rates in certain entitlement programs such as Medicaid, SNAP and food assistance, and housing assistance compared to other demographic groups. And in majority of these cases, they're working under the table, which is a practice that's not only illegal, but also harmful to our economy, our workers, and our nation as a whole. Because when you say, I'm paying you under the table, we're talking about compensating workers without proper documentation or payroll reporting, basically breaking the law to avoid taxes and legal responsibilities. And first and foremost, the legal risks that are associated for the employer is crazy. But secondly, there are no protections for these workers. And when you pay under the table, they don't have access to important labor protections like minimum wage laws or workers' compensation or even overtime pay, leaving them to be vulnerable, to be exploited, to be in unsafe conditions, and have unfair treatment. Many of them are stuck without any legal recourse. Where is the compassion in that? Paying under the table undermines fair competition. So when you have some employers cheat the system by paying under the table, they gain this unfair advantage over law-abiding businesses that follow the rules. They create an uneven playing field, incentivizing more illegal employment practices and harming honest, responsible employers. Where is the equity in that? There's also a huge impact on our economy, such as loss of tax revenue. When payments are made off the books, payroll taxes for Social Security and Medicare are avoided. Over time, this diminishes the funds that support our seniors. And guess who has to make up the difference? We do. You do. Either through increased taxes or a reduction in services that we already pay for. And let's not forget, the practice perpetuates an illegal economy. Off the books payments sustain criminal activity. It sustains fraud and a shadow economy that erodes trust in our legal system and harms legitimate businesses. Oftentimes, business owners are held hostage by bad employees, unable to enforce the law out of fear of being found out as paying under the table, paying illegal immigrants. It's destructive. It damages the integrity of our labor market. It undermines law enforcement, and it weakens our economic stability. So now that you have the facts regarding these misguided narratives, and there's so many, but I had to hit the ones that are most talked about. After the break, I'm going to give you my thoughts on why I'm encouraged by these protests, what we should be truly focused on, and how to get things back on track. We're almost finished. Don't leave the table. You're listening to the Janelle King Show right here on Extra 106.3. We'll be right back. Thank you so much for joining the show. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you'll be notified every time I upload new content. Now back to the discussion. Welcome back to the Janelle King Show. I'm Janelle King. This is Extra 106.3, and this is where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. In today's table topic, we're talking about the dangers of compassionate policy. And I want to do a quick recap for those who missed the last two segments, because this is a very important topic. See, on the surface, compassionate policies like universal health care, social safety nets, and expanding of rights sounds extremely noble. But in reality, they often open the door for reckless government overreach. They incentivize illegal activity and undermine our legal system. And when laws are relaxed and loopholes are exploited, it sends a message to illegal crossing that employment is acceptable. And when laws are relaxed and loopholes are exploited, it sends a message that illegal crossing and illegal employment are acceptable, which ultimately weakens our borders and our economy. We tackled these harmful narratives such as the stolen land message and the false idea that America's borders are illegitimate because of past injustices to Native Americans, when the truth is the Native tribes actually embrace sovereignty, they enforce their own laws, and they work with federal agencies like ICE to secure their own land. I mean, we also highlight the dangers of under-the-table employment. Paying illegal immigrants off the books might seem compassionate, but it's illegal. It damages honest businesses, it costs taxpayers billions of dollars, and it leaves vulnerable workers unprotected. That's not compassion. So now I want to close on a little bit of a lighter note, because I'm encouraged. Because we already know that according to recent polling, over 50% of Americans stand with Republicans on this matter, and we're not alone. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum condemned the violent acts that took place during this weekend's protests in Los Angeles from those who were protesting against the recent immigration raids and ICE enforcement. Sheinbaum expressed strong disapproval of all forms of violence and encouraged the Mexican community to respond peacefully while respecting the lawful migration procedures. Now, why is she on the side of America? Because in 2018, tensions hit a boiling point in Tijuana, Mexico, as thousands of migrants from Central America arrived, sparking protests and chaos.
After a month-long journey, the caravan of migrants is finally at the U.S. border. Along the way, locals have offered them food and shelter. But now that they're in this border town of Tijuana, they say they can't handle the crowds and they're at capacity. Overnight, a crisis at the border. The mayor of Tijuana requesting aid from the United Nations as nearly 5,000 Central American migrants wait to apply for asylum in the U.S. Fleeing violence and poverty, a group of migrants from Honduras waving flags and demanding to be let into the United States. The town's food and shelter pushed to the limits as migrant mothers and their children huddle under blankets just feet away from the edge of the U.S. border. All this as President Trump threatens to shut down the border.
We will close entry into the country for a period of time until we can get it under control.
For the entire border?
The whole border. I mean, the whole border.
The president not stopping there, raising the possibility of allowing U.S. troops to use lethal force.
If they have to, they're going to use lethal force. I've given the okay. Yeah, if they have to. I hope they don't have to. But, you know, you're dealing with a minimum of 500 serious criminals. So I'm not going to let the military be taken advantage of. I have no choice. Do I want that to happen? Absolutely not.
Central America is also at the border right now trying to cross, but U.S. officials say that they don't have enough space to handle them. Danielle Nottingham has more on the battle.
Migrants from Central America woke up in Tijuana, Mexico, right by the U.S. border Monday. They camped out there overnight, many with young children, in hopes of being first in line to apply for asylum. Some took part in a prayer, saying they have faith the doors will open for them. The caravan had been traveling for a month. At one point, the group had swelled to around 1,000 people, but only about 200 made it to the border. Many are applying for protection because of violence in their home countries.
Over 300 protests chanted, "Tijuana first." Sounds a lot like America first. While they waved their flags expressing hostility and even tossing water and beer cans at police during a standoff at a shelter housing 2,500 migrants. For 2,500 migrants, all of this broke out in Mexico. There were many locals who supported the migrants. They donated supplies, much like what you saw over here. Others were hostile, calling the migrants a cancer and a threat. Mexican officials, including Tijuana's mayor, called the surge an avalanche, expressing frustration. And their language echoed concerns over the scale and impact of migrants. So there you have it. While Mexican Americans, in most cases, those who are here legally, are protesting to keep those who are here illegally, they clearly were nowhere to be found when Mexico was rejecting migrants from their country. And that leads me to my final point. We don't have an immigration process issue. We have a lack of knowledge issue. We have young people who are unaware of their own biases, who have zero understanding of civics and history. Those who believe, particularly these young people, in compassionate politics simply because they haven't lived long enough to see the negative effects. You see, whether you like it or not, America was built on laws, order, and the rule of law, principles that protect us even today. The idea that we should abandon or reevaluate our borders because of historical wrongs oversimplifies the reality, and it ignores the importance of lawful enforcement. Because I truly believe in my heart that true compassion comes from enforcing the law and protecting our citizens, not turning a blind eye. So if you really care about America, if you want a safe, strong, and lawful nation, you need to understand these issues. And that enforcing our law isn't unkind. It's the compassionate thing to do. And in the end, our priority is to uphold the law, secure our borders, and ensure that we are a nation of laws built on a history of strength, promise, and shared responsibility. That's the conservative approach. And it's the one that respects the rule of law. while working to keep America and Americans safe, to keep this country prosperous and free for all, as long as you do it the right way. Until next time, stay unafraid, stay unapologetic, and never stop seeking the truth.